back to Thinksipwrite. Roberta's not here with us, but I have a very special guest. She's going to co-host with me, and she's a big fan of what we're about to talk about. So you want to introduce yourself? Who are you?
Lana Papillo.
This is my little princess. And so what is something that you and I have done? I mean, when you were in Mommy's belly, I was reading stuff to you.
Books.
You just all of a sudden seem to really like them. So we've got a couple. How many novels are we into it now?
12, because
We're
the short stories.
Well, yeah. So we're 10 of the original novels in, and we've read a couple of the short stories. And do you know who wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz?
Oh, Frank Baum.
That's right. So where should we start? Should we start with the books, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Like
All right.
the books and the movies?
Yeah, okay, so in the movies. All right, so if you were to watch the movies in any kind of order, if you're not a reader and you would rather watch the movies in some kind of order to kind of get everything, I recommend starting out with one of the most recent movies was Oz the Great and Powerful, which was the story of how the wizard got to Oz. Now, in the books, they only mention that, right? Mm-hmm. They only mention his life in the circus, and they don't really go beyond that. Okay, well, in the movie, there's a good flying monkey, right?
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
And he's a friend, but he's not a slave. So that's something we can talk about, because after Oz the Great and Powerful, it goes to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which is the Wizard of Oz in the 1939 movie with Judy Garland as Dorothy. Now, in that movie, there's some things that are different from the book. There's a lot of things different, okay? So let's start out, since we just talked about the one friend in Oz the Great and Powerful. What about the flying monkeys?
Yeah, in the movies they were just bad.
Okay.
And now in the book, the magic cap is what makes the monkeys do the stuff.
Right, so whoever has this magic cap, this golden cap, controls the monkeys, right? So
the Wicked Witch had the magic cap in the book, but it was the comic.
Right, she used the golden cap instead of the pointed brim. Actually, the original drawing of the witch wasn't even green at all.
Yeah.
And what was the main thing that the Wicked Witch of the West in the movie wanted? She wanted something.
The ruby slippers.
The ruby slippers, right? Well, what about the ruby slippers? Were they in the book?
Yeah, but they changed. They weren't the ruby slippers anymore. They were the silver slippers.
And silver shoes, right? Yeah, and they had all kinds of magical power. What are some of the other, in the books, what are some of the other magical things that they had? Do you remember?
We talked about the silver slippers, the magic cap, and...
Do you remember what the Gnome King was trying to get? The magic thing he was trying to get in one of the books?
The magic belt.
Yeah, that's right. So now that's pretty funny, because they kind of did that in the movie Return to Oz, which was done in the 80s by Disney. And Return to Oz is pretty interesting because it takes place, they kind of combined two books. They combined the second and third book. They combined Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. And they did a lot of liberties. It's actually a pretty good interpretation. They have characters like the Wheelers in there and Mombi. They had some pretty cool new characters, hero characters, which, who were the hero? Now, so who are the hero characters in The Wizard of Oz that we all know?
Dorothy, Cowardly Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow.
Right. Now, what about the Tin Man didn't they talk about in the original movie?
In the original movie, they didn't talk about what the Tin Man did before he turned into the Tin Man.
Right. So he was a Munchkin, right?
Yeah, he was a Munchkin, and he was in love with another Munchkin, and the Wicked Witch, she wanted him to love her, so she cursed his axe and chopped one leg off. And then the one guy,
the tinsmith,
he made another leg for him, and the axe just kept chopping off.
So he basically
his body parts.
He chopped all his body parts off, and I mean, as silly as that sounds, but it's magic, right? Because it's the Land of Oz.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get to the Land of Oz? We know Dorothy got there in a cyclone, in a hurricane. Yeah, but how else have people gotten to the Land of Oz?
From an earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Bill and Trot, they got there by...
A couple of people got there by going through the sea, being like shipwrecked, and they kind of did that in the Return to Oz movie.
So let's talk about that, how a lot of differences, they mixed it in.
Well, it's funny because when you make a movie, you have to take things out of the book. Like, one of the coolest parts of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is the characters, the Kaleidas. The Kaleidas are these monstrous bear and tiger type creatures.
Yeah, these things are so weird.
Yeah, and then they had the jackdaws. Remember,
Yeah.
in the movie, the witch sent the flying monkeys, and they pulled apart the scarecrow. Well, if you remember in the book, she didn't just send them. She sent bees, an army of bees, which ended up dying when they hit the Tin Man's chest. She also sent the jackdaws. Or they got caught in a nest in one of them. They didn't include the Sawhorse in the Return to Oz, but they did have Tick-Tock and Jack Pumpkinhead, which are two other amazing characters.
But they didn't say how the Sawhorse came to life.
Right, well, he came to life.
The whole story.
Well, same way that the Jack Pumpkinhead did,
Yeah.
right? So how was that?
The boy Tip, he was bring by Momby.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, Momby went to a magical house so she could get the powder of life.
Mm-hmm.
And the powder of life was made by who again?
Oh, that's really getting into it. That was made by another Munchkin who was practicing powers and stuff. But basically, they sprinkled this powder of life on Jack Pumpkinhead. And one thing, if you remember in the book, Momby was an old witch. But she just kind of was just like this old hag. In the movie, they gave her this ability to take off her heads. Well, there was a character. Remember Princess?
Yeah.
Do you remember her name?
Princess
Languidir.
Languidir. She was actually supposed to be that character who could take off her head.
Mm-hmm. So they kind of combined them, which was kind of neat. What's one thing that the Return to Oz movie didn't do when it came to Tip? I mean, they talked about Ozma, but who's Tip?
Tip is this little boy who is actually a girl, and she's the Queen of Oz. Her name is Ozma of Oz.
Right. So she was hidden there, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an animated movie that came out a couple years ago called Legends of Oz: Dorothy's Return. It was kind of silly. It had a good cast in it, and that was the one where it's not based on any of the books. That's the one where the jester was basically getting revenge because he was the brother of the Wicked Witch, and he was mad because Dorothy had basically killed the Wicked Witch, and it had a couple characters in it from some of the other lands, like China Doll was in Oz the Great and Powerful, right?
Yeah. But before we go on more, I just wanted to say that in one of the Oz movies with all those characters that we were talking about, the Gnome King, he was like this rock wall, and the gnomes were like just little rocks that could fade into other rocks. But now in the books, they're all like little rocks that can walk.
Yeah, they're kind of more like humanoid rocks that can kind of go into the, they control the underground and all the gems and everything.
And they hate eggs for some reason.
And the eggs are poison to gnomes, right?
Yeah, it's so funny.
That is silly. There's also, in the 80s, there was done a Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane in the Chris Reeve Superman movies. She narrated 4 cartoons based on the first 4 books. So if you want to watch these in order, go with Oz the Great and Powerful, The Wizard of Oz, Legend of Oz, Dorothy's Return, Return to Oz, and then watch the two animated, the last two of the animated Margot Kidder ones. That was Dorothy of Oz and The Road to Oz, because then you'll have officially gotten about 5 books in. And there's also a new thing out. We haven't checked it out yet, but it's Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. It's a newer cartoon that's out. But there's been some other really cool Oz adaptations over the years. And I know there was an amusement park at one point and it got shut down. I don't... No. Yeah, I know. And there's a couple Oz things in the works. There've always been interpretations. But what about games? There's a really cool card game that we found, right?
I think it's the best card game I have ever played.
Yeah?
It's called Munchkin, and they made an Oz one. But some of the characters look a little different.
You can show them one of the cards.
But, like, the Woggle Bug, for instance, he isn't really like a bug anymore. He looks kind of weird a little. So
they've got these really neat drawings on these cards, and it's a game. It's one of these strategy games that you buy, but all the characters from the books, and we're up to the 10th book, like I said, and there's still characters in this game that we have not come to yet. One of my favorite is the Hungry Tiger, and he likes to eat fat babies.
Fat babies.
But who's another character that likes to eat people?
He's huge.
He's a giant, right?
Yeah, and he wears pink.
Yeah.
It's called the Yoop.
The Yoop, yeah.
And there's Mrs. Yoop. We haven't come across that one yet. And I think Grandpa Yoop.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting characters. Button Bright, he's kind of like a little dopey little kid.
And then there's like Shaggy Man, Trot, Captain Bill.
She's got her notes in front of her.
TikTok, Polychrome.
You don't need to go through all of them.
Yeah, but I just want to do
General Ginger.
And
who was General Ginger? She was in charge of what?
Oh, the girl army. Mm-hmm. But then after that, she became like a servant. Then there's the Gurgles and Scoodlers.
Okay. And something else that the movie did was Glinda, the Witch of the North, right? Well, in the movie they present her as the Witch of the North, but actually in the book she's the Witch of the South. There is a Witch of the North, and she basically was combined for that movie. If you want to get into reading the whole series, there's over 40 books. There's 40 that are considered canon, okay? And that's the 15 that are by L. Frank Baum, and then there's more that came after that. So it's up to 40, and then I believe that Baum Estate, alive today, because obviously he's not around anymore, they decided there were 3 more that took place in the continuity. What is one of your other favorite stories to read?
Alice in Wonderland. Okay. You guys probably know a lot about that one.
Maybe we can do an episode on Alice in Wonderland.
But actually, there's a comic about both of them crossover.
Right, it's the Oz Wonderland War, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually, I think Marvel Comics produced that. And
that one I really want to read.
There are 4 issues of it. And it's basically, I don't know all the details of it, but I know Dorothy and Alice end up having to find their way, and all the characters from both worlds are in it, basically.
Their hair color were different. They swapped it. Alice's hair was brown and Dorothy's hair was yellow.
And you're talking about in the original illustrations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also a game on tablet and iPhone. It's called Oz Broken Kingdom.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a strategy-based, role-playing type game where you take turns and you got to use your characters and different abilities. But it's actually got a fairly good storyline that expands on the already existing universe. So.
And you kind of get excited meeting the new characters that just pop up and learning about the new characters. We don't have every single character in the Oz universe on it.
So let me ask you a question. Are you planning on reading all 40 books, or are you going to get to 15 and then you're gonna just see? Maybe we'll get to 16 and see, because that's
I just want to read all 40 books already.
okay. Well, I'm up for the challenge if you are. How old are you going to be?
9.
You're almost 9. So you're almost 9. You've already read 10 full-length novels of
When I was
just
8.
the Oz stuff, and you had two sets of short stories. So I think that we can polish off the rest of those.
Yeah.
I'm up for the challenge. Are you?
Yeah.
All right. If there's anything that you have about Oz or anything else, feel free to comment below, like, subscribe, tell your friends. And thanks for joining us, Lana. Cheers.